Draft grades are far from a new concept on YouTube when it comes to NFL content. There's plenty of people out there who dedicate a channel to a specific team and will talk about each individual pick in depth, or they'll talk about the draft class at whole in depth. There's plenty of people out there who cover the league at large, such as myself, that will go division by division or conference by conference or talk about the draft in one big video. But you never see anybody talk about each individual team in their own draft grades video. All 32 teams, 32 videos. You never see that happen until now. Because I was disappointed with the pre-draft content I was able to put out, because as a college student, free time is a luxury that I don't always have, I have decided to make up for it by making 32 videos throughout the month of May, talking about my thoughts on all 32 teams' drafts. And I'm really excited to get into this. Keep in mind, as per usual with draft grades videos, I know that I'm going to be wrong on most of these, primarily because we haven't seen these guys play. We don't know how they're going to be developed, all of that good stuff. This is just my analysis based upon how I graded different players leading into the draft. You know, if I think a guy was overdrafted based on my evaluations, underdrafted, et cetera, et cetera. That's what these grades are based off of. I also don't think I'm better than any NFL GM out there. I'm just a 21-year-old college kid who spends the little free time he has watching film. So bear with me. People seem to like my opinions on this kind of stuff. I like sharing it, so I'm going to continue to do so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Dallas Cowboys and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. Dallas's draft class is one I've really struggled with when it's come to giving it a grade, because I look at this class and I can't help but think, wow, I would have done this so differently. Like, I don't even hate some of the players they walked away with. They walked away with one of my favorite corners, one of my favorite linemen, an edge rusher I'm really intrigued by. But when I look at this class, all I can think of is, man, I wouldn't have traded down. I would have stayed put, went a different direction, and that would have made this draft class end up way differently. And there's also two positions, well, one position that's noticeably absent, and one position they neglected until day 3 that I would have tried to attack way earlier if I were them. And in one of those cases, I think they probably did plan to attack that position, and Jerry Jones kind of screwed them out of that, and we'll talk about it. But diving into what they actually did, starting out with Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma, this pick is interesting because I didn't love Guyton. Like, I had a second round grade on him, but it was a mid to a late second round grade. He was my OT 9. I had him behind guys like Blake Fisher, who went way after him. But on the flip side of things, I understand taking a tackle here because of the major run-on tackles we had. There were, 7, 8 offensive tackles that went in the first round? So I get that. I really do. But on the flip side of things, if you want to take a developmental tackle, wait a day. And instead of taking Marshawn Nealon in the second, take a Karan Amagaji, take a Kingsley Suamataia. Those guys maybe have higher upside than Tyler Guyton. And I think, would be better suited to take in the second, maybe third round. Like, value-wise, I would much rather have one of those guys in the second or the third than Tyler Guyton in the first, if that makes sense. But then again, you think about it, this is Dallas. What happened to the last offensive tackle they quote-unquote overdrafted? He was just an all-pro guard. So I'm very conflicted here. With my evaluations, the Guyton pick isn't one I love, but on Dallas's side of things, I can see the vision. But my big gripe here is, if I were them, I would have stayed put an intact interior offensive line in the first round. Taken a Jackson Powers Johnson, or if you're worried about the injury, take a Graham Barton. And then you plug up that center position that's really the big hole on your offensive line. You can keep Tyler Smith at guard instead of having to, you keep Tyler Smith at guard, or you can kick him out to tackle. And then whichever way you go with Smith is dependent upon how you attack day 2. Or in the second round, you can take a tackle, or you can go interior offensive lineman. Like, you could have taken Cooper Beebe a round before 373 and been totally fine with it. Or you could have went with one of the tackles I mentioned in Suamataia or in Karan Amagaji, and you could have had your 5 figured out. And now, you have your five figured out, but I don't love that you're going to be playing Cooper Beebe at center. And then, I don't know, it's tough. It's tough for me. Like, again, I can see the vision, but me personally, I would have went a different route with this. I don't love Tyler Guyton, but I guess if anyone's going to get him to that ceiling that he possesses with his athletic traits and his large frame, then it's going to be Dallas. You know, that's kind of the place for him to go. Like I said, he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, he's got the length, he's got the stride, or the strength. Goodness, words are difficult. But he's got all of that, and on top of that, like, when he puts everything together, there's a lot of dominance to his game. He's able to get up and make blocks on the second and third level. He's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker, which that will play into something we'll talk about in a minute that's an issue for me with Dallas. There's just a lot of inconsistencies, especially when he is a pass blocker, and also when it comes to picking up on blitzes and stunts. So you got to kind of work on the mental side of things with him there. But, Guyton's got the size, he's got the traits. I just really wish they would have handled this differently. And then we get into the second round, and I'm going to say up front, this isn't a shot at Nealon, because you can see I like Nealon. I thought this was a fine pick. I really wish Jerry Jones wasn't a moron. Like, point blank period, I really wish he wasn't a moron for their sake. Because him, immediately after the first night of the draft saying, yeah, Jonathan Brooks is the second coming of Christ. Or however he put it, right? I'm paraphrasing, kind of. I really wish he wouldn't have done that, because Jonathan Brooks would have been such a perfect fit for Dallas. And Lord knows they need the help at running back. But right now, you have Zeke, who, I know, team legend. He's not Zeke anymore, man. He's not. He simply is not. Zeke cannot be your RB1 in the year of our Lord 2024 and you cannot have Zeke as your RB1 rather and expect to have a competent run game. It just can't happen. And then you've got Rico Dowdle, who is a whole lot of nothing. Deuce Vaughn is a fun RB3. Rolls-Royce Freeman is also on the roster. You don't have anything going on at running back. This team could absolutely have benefited from a Jonathan Brooks, but because Jerry Jones decided to flap his gums, the Panthers straight up and take him, and you don't end up getting him to fall to you, which is very unfortunate for the sake of Dallas's run game, because this team is so much better when they can run the football, and I don't have a whole lot of confidence in them being able to do that this year. And then to not even kind of be like, oh, okay, shit, we fumbled the bag there. Let's go a different direction. Braylon Allen falling into the 5th or 6th round. Let's see here. There were a couple other running backs like Kamani Vidal slipped, Audric Estime slipped, Dylan Laube really slipped. They could have went so many different directions. Will Shipley was a 5th round pick. They could have went so many different directions at running back and redeemed their backfield. But instead, they just completely choose to ignore it. And I am taking that into account with my draft grades, because they needed the help. I know running backs aren't as valuable anymore, whatever. The run game still matters. Good teams can establish the run and use it to set up the pass. Dallas ain't doing that this year. They have all the blockers in the world to do it. Their offensive line, depending on what happens at center, is going to be pretty damn solid. Even then, I mean, you've still got Zach Martin and Tyler Smith, 2 All-Pros. You've got Terrence Steele, who is a solid starter, and Tyler Guyton, at least in the run game, will be good as a blocker. You've got that. You've got good blocking tight ends and Jake Ferguson and Luke Schoonmaker. And then, of course, you've got my boy Hunter Lipke, who is one of the best fullback prospects I've ever seen. Massive fan of Lipke's game. You have all of that, and you're wasting it with Zeke and Rico Dowdle. That is infuriating. But taking a look at the guy they actually did pick in the second round here, Marshawn Nealon, I think this is a very interesting pick. Because Nealon, to me, is big-time developmental. And that's not a bad thing. Dallas, their defensive line is, I'm not going to say isn't getting any younger, but DeMarcus Lawrence is hovering around 30. And you got to kind of consider, what happens after, right? Who's going to play opposite Micah, assuming you can pay him, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say Dallas is going to end up caving and paying him and CeeDee Lamb, because you can't not pay them, But you've got Micah, who's going to play opposite him once DeMarcus Lawrence retires. Well, Marshawn Nealon has the potential to do that. He has the upside. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him develop there. He's got a good frame. He's got pretty good ankle flexion and bend, especially for being a bigger guy. I mean, we're talking 6'3", 267. Pretty thick dude. He's a really high energy player, has a mean bull rush. I mean, he can just plow through people. Super high motor, like I said, able to make second, third, and sometimes even fourth effort plays. He has really powerful hands. He has a really nice spin counter as part of his surprisingly developed pass rushing arsenal. I went into Nealon thinking he was a total project, and in many aspects he is, but he does have a deeper bag than you would expect. It's just kind of a matter of figuring out, okay, this offensive lineman is showing this, so I need to respond with this move. He's showing that, I need to respond with that move. That kind of thing. Kind of picking and choosing how to fight his battles is more of the issue than it is, you know, knowing how to actually attack. He's a really stout run defender. He's got good eye discipline. He's able to navigate traffic pretty well as a run defender. He's quickly stacks and sheds blocks with violent hands and quick feet. Like, he is a very physical, aggressive pass rusher. He's got long arms. Like, he's got what you want there. He's just not the most athletic guy in the world. He will turn his back on blockers, which is a big no-no. And his hand usage and counters need to be a little bit better. Like, his hand usage is a little sloppy. He got the job done at Western Michigan, but when you get to the NFL, you need to work on that. And his counters, like, he knows when to get to them, but he's always like a second or two late. And again, at Western Michigan, that wasn't the biggest deal, but getting to the NFL, it's going to become a bigger deal. So definitely want to make sure you get that taken care of. But like, I like what he brings to the table. I think he's a good developmental option here at edge. And as mad as I am, they didn't end up going running back. I really like the Marshawn Nealon pick for them. I thought that was a good move for sure. And, you know, again, with the running back thing, they didn't even have to go running back in the second round. I'm just saying it here because this is right about where the guy that everyone thought they were going to go after went, and the guy that they very clearly wanted to go after went, unless Jerry Jones is playing some sort of 4D chess. And I'm going to keep it a buck. I don't know if old Jerry has it in him to play any 4D chess. So either way, I like the pick. And then we get into the third round, and this is the pick they actually got from trading down. They get Cooper Beebe, the interior lineman out of Kansas State. Played guard. Looks like he's going to be playing center. I don't know how much I love that. We'll have to see how he kind of translates. I will say he has had experience there. I just think he projects best as a guard. But you're looking at a guy who fits the bill perfectly as a guard. Good get off, good leg drive, really aggressive and physical arms and hand placement, vice grips for hands, really hard to get off of them, solid anchor, really good at finishing blocks at the second level, really smart as a pass blocker. Like, if he doesn't have a guy in front of him, he is jumping straight away to some sort of help defense, or help blocking rather, you know, double teaming guys and whatnot. Really good at picking up on stunts and blitzes. And like I said, he has that versatility. He's just somebody that has shorter arms. His foot quickness isn't fantastic. So we'll have to see how he's able to handle that. But I guess playing at center, that kind of stuff does get minimized. So we'll have to see. I'm very interested. I think his reach blocking is something you're going to have to think about, especially with him playing center. That's not something I loved, but I think BB's a hell of a player. And, you know, having your best five be a group of Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, Zach Martin, Terrence Steele, and Tyler Guyton isn't the worst thing in the world. Again, I like the offensive line they're building. I just didn't love the value with Guyton, and I don't know how I feel about BB playing center instead of guard. You know, I would have much rather have seen this be Tyler Smith at left tackle, then Cooper Beebe, then Graham Barton, then Zach Martin, Terrence Steele. Like, that would have been ideal for me. But I digress. I'm not going to keep harping on it because we're beyond the offensive lineman. And then also in the third round, they take Marist Luafau, the linebacker out of Notre Dame. And look, I'm going to keep it a buck. Don't like this pick. I really don't. I mean, first of all, taking a look at the linebackers that were still on the board, Luafau was the fourth guy off the board. So Edgerrin Cooper, Junior Colson, Trevin Wallace were the only guys to go ahead of him. You have Peyton Wilson, Cedric Gray, Tyrese Knight, Tommy Eichenberg, Jeremiah Trotter, Jalen Ford, Nathaniel Watson, Michael Barrett. There were a lot of linebackers on the board that I thought were better. Like, you can see I didn't have Luafau graded before the draft, but if I had to go back and grade Luafau, Like, if I were to lump him in with the guys that I had, he would have ended up with like a 6th, 7th round grade for me, which would have put him at the bottom of my linebacker rankings, right next to Tyrese Knight and Curtis Jacobs. So I'm not a fan. Like, you're looking at a guy who really, really struggles to tackle. 20% missed tackle rate in 2023 is unacceptable from a linebacker. He doesn't have the twitchiness you want. He doesn't have a lot of splash plays on film. He's somebody that's really over aggressive when it comes to playing downhill. He's got the size, and that's kind of what you want. You know, that's kind of what you're getting, I guess. Like, you've got the frame, maybe you're hoping you can develop them. But the Cowboys needed like a day one starter at linebacker. You know, they needed somebody who's going to come in with Damone Clark and Eric Kendricks, which is really sad to say with Eric Kendricks. But you needed somebody that was going to come in right away and be a day one starter. And I don't see that with Luafau at all. I really do not. So taking him here in the 3rd round with better linebackers on the board, I can't get behind it. Not giving them an F because this is a need. You know, like, this isn't the worst pick they could have made, because at the end of the day, they did need a linebacker. But I think they fumbled the bag pretty aggressively going with Luafau over some of the other names. I mean, I still can't believe Jeremiah Trotter fell to the 5th round, and you let your division rival go get him. Like, Jeremiah Trotter could have developed and ended up being the next, like, great Mike for Dallas. Same thing with a guy like Tommy Eichenberg or Cedric Gray or Jalen Ford. Like, there were plenty of guys that not only were better, but you could have waited to get. You know, you could have went another position of need here in the 3rd and waited until the 4th or not the 4th, excuse me, the 5th or the 6th to get one of these other linebackers without the board ended up falling. And I mean, hindsight's 2020 on that end. I'm not going to hold that specifically against them with the whole taking a linebacker here in the 3rd, but I don't know. I don't like the linebacker they went with. There were plenty of better linebackers on the board, and I just think this was not the move, personally, for me. And then we get to the 5th round, and the Cowboys kind of redeem themselves here after a shaky 3rd round, and they end up taking Kalen Carson, the corner out of Wake Forest. First and foremost, fantastic value. Carson was somebody I liked a lot. He was my CB10, had an early to mid 3rd round grade on him. You get him here in the 5th round. That's one of the better value picks in the whole draft. And he's somebody that I do think can start right away. You know, you look at the cornerback room you have right now, you have Trayvon Diggs, who, when healthy, is one of the best corners in the league. Right now, he's coming off an injury. I don't think he's going to come back and be washed or anything. So we'll have to see how his injury recovery goes. And then, of course, on the other side, you have Deron Bland coming off a very up and down record-setting season, which is a crazy thing to say, but Cowboys fans, obviously, you're no stranger to that sentiment. It would be one thing if it happened one time, but for it to happen twice, that is a bit weird. But I digress. You get Carson, and he brings you something you don't really have with those two, and that's just a fuck you attitude. He is one of the most aggressive corners in this draft. He has the prototypical size and length for the position. He has good long speed. Didn't test, so nothing to back that up, but on tape, he looked very, very good in that regard. He has a pretty solid acceleration. He's very good at, you know, kind of locking onto routes, closing on them, especially, you know, when a receiver generates that little bit of separation at the top of their route. Carson's really good at snapping back onto him. He has really good eye discipline, both in coverage and in run defense. You know, he's very good at seeing the field. There's a lot of effort and play strength as a run defender for him. Now, I will say that aggression does come with some issues. He was penalized 5 times within the last 2 seasons for getting a little grabby. His ball skills aren't great, but when you have Diggs and Bland, you don't really need a third corner to have those ball skills. Obviously, it would be great, but I think you can settle for having a corner who's just a lockdown guy that's going to mug receivers at the line of scrimmage. There are going to be some missed tackles with the aggressiveness he displays, but that's something you can definitely clean up. And he is recovering from a foot injury, which is why he didn't test, but I think he'll be all right. I haven't seen anything to suggest that this is going to be a major issue for him, so we'll have to see how that works out. But again, you look at that DB room, that corner trio with Hooker and Wilson as your 2 main safeties, that's a pretty respectable secondary. You know, like I said, I think Carson will start day one. For a comp, this is the only one I'm going to bring up because I do have him comp to a former Cowboy, and that is Chidobe Awuzie. You know, a very similar aggressive man corner. I don't know how they'll kind of divvy out who plays where. I could see Carson playing from the slot. I think that would definitely make sense for his skill set. I think he has the capability to do that for sure. If he ends up playing on the outside, he can absolutely do that as well. This is a pick I really like for the Cowboys. Carson was maybe my favorite corner in the draft. It was between him, Renardo Green, and Ennis Rakestraw. I was a big fan of those three, and all very similar players in terms of their aggression. If it's not apparent, I love me an aggressive corner. So I thought that was a great pick. Again, getting to pair him with the other two in that cornerback room is a great decision. And then in the 6th round, they take Ryan Flournoy, I believe is how you pronounce his name, the wide receiver from Southeast Missouri State. What a pool. I mean, seriously, what a pool. He was actually somebody I did get around to watching. Now, I will say, I scouted 35 receivers this year because this was a very deep receiver class. I wanted to make sure I covered a lot of ground. And unfortunately, Flournoy was my lowest graded receiver. Now, that being said, I did have a mid-6th round grade on him, and that is right about where the Cowboys took him. My only complaint with this pick, well, with Flournoy being the pick, we'll put it that way, and then I'll talk about the other thing, is that I did think there were better receivers on the board. Brendan Rice, Taj Washington, and Cornelius Johnson were all receivers I would have taken ahead of him, especially Taj Washington, when you consider that this is going to be probably a slot guy for Dallas, ideally, if he's able to see the field. So I don't love it in that regard, but looking at Flournoy as a player, like I think he projects pretty well as a slot. He's got the build. He's got really aggressive, physical, and like consistent hands. He's able to pluck the ball out of the air. Good enough athlete. He was able to play inside and outside at Southeast Missouri State. I do think he'll be a slot receiver at the next level. He was somebody that they gave a lot of design touches to, mainly on jet sweeps. He works back to the ball pretty well on underthrown passes. And he's a willing and capable blocker who sustained blocks through the whistle pretty consistently, which is always a great thing. Now, that being said, he's not the most nuanced route runner. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He struggles against press coverage, but working from the slot, that won't really be an issue. And he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie. So take that as you will. 6-year senior coming out of a very small school. We'll have to see how he adjusts to the next level of competition. But I mean, this isn't a pick I can hate. Like I said, the big reason this grade is knocked is because I did think there were better receivers on the board. I also, and this doesn't go into this grade, but this will go into the final grade, I'm pretty upset Dallas didn't go wide receiver sooner. Like I said, this is one of the deepest wide receiver classes in my lifetime. And you look at Dallas's wide receiver room, you have CeeDee Lamb, top 5 receiver, no doubt about that. You have Brandon Cooks, who is not getting any younger. I think he is just at 30. Yep, just turned 30. Working on 31, actually. Turned 30 in 2023, born in 93, is what I was trying to say there. You've got Jalen Tolbert, who I'm not exactly moved by. And then you look at the rest of this room. Kavontae Turpin's a return specialist. Jalen Brooks, Racey McMath, Jalen Moreno-Cropper, Tyron Johnson, Cam Johnson, David Durden, Corey Crooms Jr., and then, of course, Ryan Flournoy. This would have been a great year to take a receiver on day 2, or even earlier on day 3, and, get them at least developing behind Cooks and see, if they can be your long-term 2 next to Lamb. Because, again, I know there's some issues with CeeDee's contract. I expect Dallas to pay him. I think it would be a pretty stupid move if they didn't, and as much as I don't like Jerry Jones, I do think he is at least smart enough to make sure he gets paid. But the point is, this would have been a great year to take a receiver, even if you don't necessarily need one right this second. A receiver over Luafau in the 3rd would have been a fantastic pick. Get yourself somebody who can play from the slot, replace Tolbert, and gives you something your receiver room doesn't have, something like that. Like, there were plenty of opportunities for them to add receiver talent, and they wait until the 6th round. Can't say I love that. And then their 7th round picks, I'll tell you straight up, I did not watch either of Nathan Thomas or Justin Rogers, so I'm just going to say their grades aren't going to be reflected in the final grade. I'm just going to say the grading ends after the 6th round, and if you take if you take issue with that, I do apologize, but I only have so much time. I unfortunately didn't get around to as many prospects as I wanted to this year because of school and life and whatnot, so I apologize. Rodgers, to my understanding, is just a straight-up nose tackle, and, you know, I can't say that's a bad pick by any means, especially because Mozzie Smith is slimming down. Looks like he's going to be trying to play more of a 3-tech role. We'll have to see how that pans out for him. I was very disappointed by Mozzie Smith last year. I loved him coming out of Michigan, and him not looking great last year was pretty upsetting. So hopefully him dropping some weight and switching his role will make him a better football player. And if Justin Rogers helps him do that, then by all means. And Nathan Thomas, offensive lineman, sure, you know, can never have too much offensive line depth. The process of taking an offensive lineman in the 7th round, I can't get upset by, you know, and again, it's the 7th round. I can't say too much about those 2 picks. So as a whole, I'm going to give the Cowboys a B. I thought this draft was fine. And I do think guys like Carson, Beebe, Nealand, and Guyton will either have an immediate impact or have the potential to have a major impact long term. If Guyton and Nealand can develop, look out, right? 6'8" offensive lineman and an edge rusher that doesn't know the meaning of quit. If these 2 can develop, look out. Beebe, I think he'll be able to play center good enough. Again, I would have liked to have seen them go a different route to get a center. I love Beebe and I like him in Dallas. It's just more of a, if you're going to draft him, play him at guard type thing for me, but I digress. I still give the pick an A+. I think he's going to be awesome. And Kalen Carson, of course, I'm a major fan of. Ryan Flournoy, we'll have to see what happens. I think at worst, he can be a very solid special teamer, and in the 6th round, sure. Luafau, prove me wrong, brother. Please, prove me wrong. I don't want to hate, you know, I sound like a hater now. I don't want to hate on any of these guys. I don't want to wish on anybody's downfall. Especially not a guy that I know has like no big drama surrounding him. Now, if this was Jermaine Burton, who ended up going to the Bengals, different story. But I digress. Luafau, prove me wrong. Please, come be the next Sean Lee. Be an incredible linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys and make it so Cowboys fans, can come back to this video here in 2-3 years and be like, man, Luafau just got his 2nd first-team All-Pro nod. What are you talking about? You know, I would love to see that in the comments. But either way, I'm a little, like I said, I'm a little disappointed they didn't walk away with a running back. I wish they would have went receiver a little bit earlier, but I can't be too mad at this. Definitely not the worst draft in this division. We'll be talking about that in the next video where I talk about the Commanders, because surprise, surprise, I was not a big fan of them taking Jaden Daniels 2nd overall, but that is another story for another time. I do think the Cowboys had themselves a pretty okay draft, all things considered. Now, if this is going all in, as Jerry Jones stated, ooh-wee. But I suppose we shall see. I just, like I said, I really wish Jerry Jones wasn't an idiot and wouldn't have said all those things about Jonathan Brooks, because, man, Dallas could have used him. But I digress. Good draft overall, and I definitely can't hate it too much.
Had a chance on the throwback.
This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that